actually, I don't have anything unless council has anything.
I just have one thing. I noticed that the discussion about the massage therapy ordinance kind of just got off the radar. My understanding is we're going a different direction with an ordinance change. Do you know anything about that, Eric? Or?
It is on the grid for a couple weeks from now.
Oh, it's still
April
on the grid?
8th, I want to say. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Work session, is that right, Eric?
Yes, councilors. We will be coming to a work session to present some additional proposals. So we're continuing to work. We've had several meetings with massage therapists to get some additional input on kind of our new approach. And so the intent is to come in April to present that.
Okay.
Anything else for follow-up? Okay, great. We will move on to the LGBTQ Advisory Board updates. I think Salim is going to tee us up and then we'll invite our guests.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, good evening. Glad to be here with you tonight, filling in for our city manager. So the LGBTQ committee, advisory committee was formed in 2020, and we most recently heard from them in October of 2024. I remember we were actually still at the Lyric at that time. And so at that time, they gave update on progress for initiatives that they had been working on up until that time. And we were still awaiting the results of our municipal equality index. And so that committee agreed to come back and present to council again on the results of that index, as well as provide some recommendations to council on ways that we could potentially improve that score in the future. And so if it pleases the council, we'd like to invite members or Chair Elliot Hinkle and Co-Chair Daryl Wagner to come up and give their presentation.
Well, hello, council. Good to be with you all today. My name is Elliot Hinkle. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the chair of the Casper LGBTQ Advisory Committee right now. I also have Daryl Wagner with me as our vice chair. I'm excited to bring back some information since we saw it in October. So we can go to the next slide. So this is just a list of our current advisory committee. We did actually just bring one more person onto our committee, so this list will get updated later. But this is our current roster of folks who are with us. We've got also two students one from NC and one from Kelly Walsh as well representing. We can go to the next slide. Yeah.
You speak up a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I can try. Of course. So Casper Cares is one of the things that the committee wanted to take on to try to get more information to the community about what's available. So what is going to happen is Casper Pride will actually share out some visuals that help people understand who is the city council and what does it do, as well as the non-discrimination ordinance, sort of a one-pager about that so that people are aware of it. To our knowledge, there's actually been one person who's able to successfully use the non-discrimination ordinance because of something that happened to them. So really appreciating that the NDO exists because it has been helpful to someone in community already. So you'll see the Did You Know sort of flyers come out soon to be shared as information for the community. We'll go to the next slide. I'll give it over to Daryl to talk about the NEI.
Thank you again for the opportunity to present this information. For those of you that are not familiar with the Municipal Equality Index, it serves two purposes. One, it lets the community know how much support is here for equality and inclusion, but it also serves to anybody who's looking to bring business to the area, because as they're trying to bring businesses to the area, they're recruiting folks to work for those businesses. And those people, if they're coming from Arizona, California, even Colorado, they want to know what those scores are, and they look at those scores. And so when we, the first time that we appeared on that scale was 2015, and our score was 3 out of 100. And that was one of the reasons why this committee was developed, was to act as an advisory committee to the city council to see how we could improve that score and make Casper more attractive and feel more safe for the citizens. So you'll see that over the years, with the help of this committee and some of city staff, we've been able to bring that score up to 74 as of the 2024 index. Next slide, please. You'll see that Casper is second in Wyoming. Laramie is the only city with a higher score than we have. And that Cheyenne, Gillette, Jackson, Rock Springs, and Sheridan are all scored by these criteria. I believe your packet has that score sheet so you can see how that score is derived. We're pretty happy with the 74 points. And if we go to the next slide, there are flex points that can be earned. We are already receiving quite nearly the top of the available points for most criteria. However, there are a couple of places where flex points can be earned to strengthen our score. But also the feeling of the safety in the community. Our previous recommendation to the council has been a long list of things. The most important for us right now is highlighted as youth bullying prevention policy for city services. And that's basically making sure that there are policies and prevention, bullying prevention in place for all city services. We already work with the school district on the training and awareness in the school district, but in terms of city services, rec department, parks and so on, we want to see if there might be a way to develop a policy that would be anti-bullying. Next, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
So the key recommendation we're bringing back after the council requested we bring a recommendation more specifically back to you all is related to a couple of things. So you all heard from the Natrona Collective Health Trust recently about the youth focus group that they did with young people. I was able to facilitate that group with Leanne Moya. And so that timing of that group was well able to sync up with what we were thinking about this policy being necessary in ways that the city can actually partner directly with young people to develop a youth bullying prevention policy for city services. So it benefits, of course, that score, but highly benefits young people experiencing city services and feeling some protection from bullying not being allowed or accepted in city services. So it aligns with a lot of the comments that young people shared about not feeling safe and experiencing bullying in community, as well as some of the responses we've seen in some of the Waller Hall raw data, where people explicitly name that they're in Casper and have experienced unsafe environments. So our request of City Council is to address this in part via a youth bullying prevention policy for city services. I think about the Youth Empowerment Council as one avenue to partner with that they could help draft something and keep that idea moving forward. And then just an additional recommendation to continue partnering with local groups to create safe third spaces. That's something that young people also brought up as lacking in our community. And I think in addressing that point equally addresses the need for this community as well. We can go to the next slide. And that's pretty much all we have for today for you all, but of course, welcome any questions you all have about this and encourage you to review the scorecard from HRC to just better see what we're doing and areas of improvement we can continue to work on. But any questions from the council are welcome. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation, Elliot. I apologize, I was a bit unprepared. I was going to rely on my AI friend to help me out, but what do you have an example of what you would consider a youth bullying prevention policy for city service? I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that looks like in practice for city as an organization.
Yeah, I think there's some examples that are out there we could look to, but I also think it means how do young people go to the rec center and make sure that they don't feel like bullying happens, or if it does happen, that there's a policy in place to address that bullying, just make it clear that no one should experience that, feel that, and what's the process that should be in place for someone if they experience bullying. I think would be some of the key things we'd want to address, but I think in talking with young people directly, they'd also give us some good direction on what have they experienced and are looking for protections or direction around. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, I'm new to city council, so I haven't seen the last, couple of years of presentations. Do you guys, is this a presentation quarterly or what is this, monthly?
I think
quarterly?
partially just at the maybe twice a year, but also just at the invitation of the council. Yeah.
Okay. One thing that would help me is the report. It's good information. It's just, for me, it's probably a little broad.
Sure.
I don't know if there's, how much information there is in relation to any kind of statistics. There's some mention of, polls that were taken or,
Yes.
you know, different kind of things like that. If there's a way, maybe in the next presentation, maybe just compile some more data just in terms of numbers and, you know, how are we breaking this out? There's a highlight and, you know, I mean, just for example, there's a highlight for this presentation, safety in the community and bullying. You know, and I mean, I can look up that information myself and statistic wise, but you know, statistics of bullying and between, I mean, are you just talking about bullying in a general sense or within the LGBT community? You know, just kind of if maybe just break it down a little more like that, a little more precise analytical information would kind of help me look at that.
Yes, no, agreed. Working with Waller Hall to get us more clear answers of what's the data from their survey that's also specific to Casper, because some of their raw data right now doesn't break that out for me enough. So I don't want to present on that without being clear that what I'm telling you is the Casper responses. So that should be coming soon. And then for the MEI, you can look online to see more about how that scoring happens. And of course, we're also happy to talk with you more about any of the information that's there.
Just one more. Does Wyoming have any? Do they collect any data? Do they do any, you know, polling or any focus groups that anybody knows? And like I said, I mean, I can look at it myself, but if you just, you know, off the top of your head, you know, if there's any numbers like that.
I know that there's been the Youth Behavioral Risk Survey, forgetting the last two, YBRSS is one place we could look to. Sometimes school districts do it, so we'd have to see what was the most recent, if Natrona County has collected bullying information on data on that. We can certainly look into it and get you more of that information.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I'm so glad you brought that up. I've talked about that survey before in the past. I'm really upset that the state doesn't, I guess maybe some municipalities or counties do it on their own. I wasn't aware of that, so thanks for that. But the state used to sort of organize and conduct that survey so that we had really good data on a local level about youth, drug use, sexual activity, bullying, and those other things. And so I guess I wonder if the LGBT Advisory Council, potentially in collaboration with other organizations related to the youth, I would love to see folks advocate and lobby for that to return. And I'd be happy to support that in whatever way we could as a council. Don't have the capacity to kind of champion it myself, but I would absolutely support people lobbying the legislature to bring that survey back, because unfortunately we've now got a gap of data, which kind of harms identifying patterns over time and stuff, which sucks, but would love to see it return. So I don't know if there's any interest in this group participating in that sort of effort, but I would support that, and that's something I think would be super helpful.
Yeah, no, happy to bring it back to the council or to the committee. And I know in other states that I work with that survey data is incredibly helpful, especially when it's up to date. So yeah, happy to chat more about it.
Cool.
Mayor, if I might, Councillor, I'd be happy to get with Elliot and with Leanne over at the Health Trust, who's heading up the Youth Mental Health Task Force, as well as Anna Kinder at the Department of Health. I know we're doing a community health assessment now, and so this seems kind of like a corollary to that. And so I think this would really slot in very nicely with those efforts and those organizations. So I'd be happy to help facilitate that.
Awesome, let's do it. I'm all for it.
Elliot, thanks for sharing this. The HRC Human Rights Campaign, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I agree with Kyle or Councilor Gamroth that the youth risk behavior survey would be really helpful. My understanding of it, because it was around for years and then it kind of went away, was this was kind of before I left public education, but that there was quite a bit of pushback from school districts about administering it. The Department of Health gathered the data, but districts were pushing back that it was interfering with full-time and et cetera. And so it kind of went by the wayside. And so it's kind of all over the place, but I would agree. I think it would be very helpful data to have. And then I've been somewhat involved with that mental health collective that Eric mentioned. And yeah, I know that safe third spaces is definitely a priority for,
Yeah, I thought
it's
it was
kind of our first
interesting.
priority.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was interesting when we walked with the young people, that like their top concern wasn't youth violence. It came up much later in the night when that was a concern. Their concerns were not having safe spaces, experiencing bullying, those sort of concerns that we share, but that wasn't their top concern in the consideration of violence, which I just say to say, I think young people have a lot to tell us and we should be asking them more what they think and what they're experiencing.
Sure. And I just the last thing I would say is, I think for any of these flex points, I think these would be fabulous, but I think it would be helpful to council if there are any resources or examples that you could provide us or point us to in terms of the anti-discrimination or non-discrimination, the contractor policy.
Yeah.
Specifically, enforcement mechanisms, et cetera. I think those would be helpful. I am very pleased to see the improvement in the school overtime. I think, I don't know if the first report to council, I think was in
21.
but the last one I remember was just on my time on council, I think was, I don't know if I was on board for the 22 report, but
I saw it too, so it had to have been something like that.
when it was a 20.
You and I got on at the same time. We've
Okay.
seen this before.
But I am pleased to see the improvement. So
Yeah.
over time, so that's encouraging. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Councilor Sweeney.
So I'm to answer one of the questions on the state level. I think 4 years ago, possibly 5, there was an attempt to do bias motivated crimes. So hate crime, we're down to the last 2 states, Wyoming and South Carolina. I believe it is. Maybe it's North Carolina. I think it's South. That doesn't have any sort of hate crime, especially hate crime. And we were unable to gain traction in front of judiciary. We would, but that didn't happen. Thankfully, communities around the state, I think, it's clear. And Dennis and Judy Shepherd live here in Wyoming and in Casper. And, so it's kind of an insult. I believe, I know it is to them, but Wyoming probably being the last state, if we ever get anything on a state level, then it doesn't have to be just LGBTQ. That's evidenced by the ordinance that got passed 2 years ago, a year and a half ago in Casper. But I think Cheyenne, Laramie, Jackson might be missing 1 or 2 on the state that have basically what we put in place. I think ours is maybe a little broader than some of the communities, but ours actually contains old people like me, and not just LGBTQ.
All right, I'll check that out. I'll look that up. Okay. Let's get another.
Questions? I'll just add, for me as the liaison, one of the liaisons to this committee, I've encouraged throughout that council not consider this to be a punch list, so to speak, that we've got to get all these things just for the sake of getting the points. I think that when we've worked with the committee, we've really tried to figure out, where is the impact? As if it's just to do a thing, and there's one, the community's not asking for it. Two, we don't seem to see, some of these things just don't overlap with what our city offers. And so the committee, I think, has been really thoughtful in figuring out where can we make an impact? Where does it actually matter to put some sort of policy in place versus where can we get more points? And so I think the recommendation to you today is that a youth bullying prevention policy not only aligns with this committee and gets us potentially a couple flex points, which is a great added bonus, but is consistent with what we've been hearing about other community dialogue, other youth work that we've been trying to do. And so, I would encourage you to consider that recommendation just on its own. And you can see that it's listed as a youth bullying prevention policy, which would be impact all youth. It does not have to be specifically related to just members of the LGBTQ community. It would be for all youth. And so I think that's the recommendation after the committee's taken the time to parse through the score, to talk to HRC and to think about where, alignment can be found within what the city already offers. That's the recommendation before you. So I would ask if there's interest in having pursuit of that recommendation, if we want to talk about it here more, if we'd like to pitch it to staff to ask them to do some thinking on it and see where that might fit within policies that they already have potentially in place within the facilities where we do interact with youth, which I think is predominantly our rec facilities. Would take direction as to where we want to head, or if you have interest in entertaining that recommendation.
Yeah, I would love if city staff took a first pass at developing that policy. I think public sentiment is that the city and organizations within the city do something to curb youth violence, and the city's kind of limited in its tools to do so. Organizations like the school district interact with youth a lot more, but as Mayor Pro Tem said, we do see youth in mostly our rec facilities, but anything and everything the city can do to support and keep the momentum going in that direction. Would love to see that. So I think it sounds totally appropriate, unless the city attorney's office has any reasons to think it might not be appropriate. It's one of the few things I think the city can do to, show support in that realm. So I would advocate city taking a first pass at it and presenting it to us at a future session.
I'm happy to have comes to mind with a general, anti-bullying work session discussion.
Is that satisfactory?
I mean, Pro Tem Councilor, yeah, I think, if we're talking about an internal policy, certainly discuss whether or not we ordinance that would carry potential criminal repercussions, but we can certainly parse that internally and decide what probably fits best.
Thank you. I would say, as the department that would likely work the closest with the attorney's office to develop the policy, I'm pleased to say that we do have some policy already in development that could be bolstered to just fold this in. We have youth interaction policies already that kind of dictate how staff interacts with youth and what is appropriate there. And so we could certainly look at spinning off from policies that already exist and seeing how they tie together to guide the rec division in our interactions. So I think that is a very doable.
Sorry, I don't want to keep throwing stuff on your shoulders. I don't want to create the scope so large. Maybe I'm getting a bit off topic, but I would also be curious, since you mentioned the way of ordinances, I'd be curious what our ordinances outline, if anything, in regards to like youth bullying. I'm thinking specifically of a pretty well publicized incident recently of an adult stalking and harassing a teenage girl in Glen Rock. And so I would like to support my belief, or my understanding of Senator Boner is going to be kind of working to fill those gaps in state statute during this interim session. But if there's anything the city can do to be a partner in those efforts, I don't want a family in Casper to go through the same thing that this Glen Rock family did. if we can be a little more proactive about it, I would certainly like to do that. So I don't know if that's too broad of a scope, but I would love to know kind of where we're at with that and what we can do to shore up our ordinances or help support shoring up state statute to prevent that from happening in Casper.
Yeah, Mayor. Yeah, we certainly can look at that. That'll be a discussion with the PD, I think. But yeah, that's certainly within our realm.
Any further questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the report. Okay. Pass it back to acting city manager to talk about park rental rates.
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. Councilors, as you have learned over the last several years that I've been Parks and Rec Director, every couple of years we come to you with a proposal to review and consider increases to our rates where staff believes that that's appropriate. And so this is one of those circumstances. This time we are looking at increasing rates for several of our City of Casper Park facilities. So the last time we looked at rate increases for parks was in 2019. That was done by a resolution of the City Council, and that dictated the rates that we charge for things like tennis courts, rental of our park shelters, rental of the municipal, the Washington Park band shell. And so considering that it's been a pretty long time since we looked at raising rates, and also what we're seeing in terms of increased cost of maintenance for all of our facilities across the park system, we do feel like it's appropriate to request an increase in rates at this time. We want to keep in mind that park facilities are open to anybody on a first come, first served basis for free. And so you don't have to rent a shelter in order to utilize a shelter at one of our parks. However, if you want to be guaranteed the space at the time that you want to utilize it, then we do recommend a reservation just to ensure that that space that you want will be available to you. And so we are only talking about those circumstances where people are looking to have dedicated space explicitly for them or their group. And so there are a number of attachments to the memo that hopefully you had a chance to look through, but as it has become standard for our division and department, we certainly went out and we looked at comparables across the state of Wyoming and here locally, primarily with the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. Or sorry, I'm mixing up. I'm mixing up topics. We have looked at comparables across Wyoming and in the region to see, you know, what are they charging for park amenities to rent. And we do feel like this recommendation to increase our park rates aligns well, still keeps us very competitive in the region, and adds great value to our community in terms of these rental opportunities. The other thing that I wanted to point out is the fact that we are making pretty significant investments in our infrastructure in several of these areas. Washington Park is getting brand new pickleball courts, brand new tennis courts, and so you'll see a pretty significant increase in the cost to rent those, to reserve them for specific timeframes, as well as, you know, thanks to the specific purpose sales and use tax, a $1.5 million investment in the Washington Park band shell. So those kinds of investments that are being made, you know, we feel really justify an increase in the rate that people will pay for those amenities in our community, because they will be even nicer than they already are. So that is what we are proposing to you. Randy Norvell, our Parks Manager, is here to help me answer any questions that you may have on specifics of what we're proposing. This particular action would require formal action from the council. If you feel good about the concept that we've proposed, then we will prepare a new resolution to come forward at a regular business meeting. So we would rescind the previous resolution that established the old rates and then replace it with a new resolution.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks, Ulima, for the context and the kind of kick off the discussion. My question is, have we reached out to user groups, especially frequent users of some of these facilities, to see what, if any, impact that might have on some of their activities? Specifically, I'm looking at the 5 parks that'll be reclassified as a large shelter. They're going to go from a current rate of 30 to looks like $100. And so I just wanted to make sure all the events I'm thinking of are more of like an kind of a one-time annual kind of basis. So perhaps it's a lot easier for them to absorb. But I might be ignorant of some of the activities that go on there. So are there frequent users of those specific facilities? And if so, what has their feedback been on those ones?
Mayor Pro Tem, since Randy and his team did much of the legwork in putting the proposed rates together, I will turn it to him to answer that question.
Mayor, Council, no, we did not pull any of the user groups.
Can you think of any, those 4, 5 park specific, can you think of any people that are using them on a regular basis, or is it more just the one-off birthday parties, like Adventure Crossroads? I know they do the, yeah, I mean, like the suicide.
Derby, the trails
Duck Derby, yeah, which is a one-time a year thing, but do you know of any groups that are kind of reserving them on a monthly basis during the summer months?
We do have some user groups, just, but it's not set in stone. I mean, they might, we had a church group rent the band shell for like 4 weeks in a row while their parking lot was getting paid. But so no, we don't, except for one-time events, usually have consistent users. The only other thing I would say with that, excuse me, well, it's the Wyoming Symphony. And Wyoming, the Casper Municipal Band uses the facility, but it's free.
Oh, for the municipal band?
The municipal band.
Because they're a city-funded organization or something like that. I don't know exactly what their charter is or whatever. Thanks. Yeah, and the band shell I had wanted to talk about, it looked like the caveat at the bottom of our memo is that no rate change will take effect until it's been rebuilt, which I was glad to see. I'm curious if you expect there to be, I've always been kind of disappointed that people don't utilize the band shell more. It's an amazing space. I love going to the symphony concert there. Do we expect more demand of that facility? I guess, do we expect, are the deteriorating conditions at the facility potentially preventing people from reserving it more often? Do we expect to see it reserved more often after we've improved it?
I hope I'm sorry, Mayor, Council. I do expect an increase because we want to start using it as more of a marketing and to get more users at that facility. I think cleaning it up and expanding the stage and will help a lot too.
I would just like to add that part of our goal in the renovations to the band shell, and then if we are lucky enough to be awarded the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant that we've applied for to match the spec tax funding, the entire south side of Washington Park would be improved so that it is really attractive for events at the band shell. And so we hope that between the investments that are being made in the park all on their own and the additional programming that the city would like to start introducing at our facility, so that we can encourage more use, whether that's for youth events or other community focused events that would be sponsored and kind of organized and put on by the city of Casper, that would spawn additional use ideas from clubs and other groups that then may be interested in renting the space at times for whether it's an annual, semi-annual event. The hard thing about Washington Park Band Shell is that we do have a limited season here in Casper, but we definitely see an opportunity with a significant investment to really increase use of that.
Okay. Yeah, that's my hope as well. I tried calling Kim Walker over the weekend, and unfortunately we didn't get the opportunity to connect. She does the Politics in the Park forums and uses the band shell, and I know she usually holds somewhere in the neighborhood of like 12 to 15 events. So my guess is that would increase her budget for those reservations about $1,500, which potentially she has the margins for. I don't know. I don't know what her organization works with in the way of funding, but yeah, I would hope to see increased usage and as a result of kind of the improved conditions, and hope that the folks that have historically used it can make it work within their budget to keep kind of their historical activities up. But yeah, I agree that Casper does remain very competitive in its rates and stuff, and I think it's important to clarify you did at the beginning, that if somebody wants to use the tennis court for free, they're still able to do that. You don't have to pay to use the tennis courts, but if you want, you know, to restrict others from using it at the same time, you need to make a reservation. So important, I think, to point out so that people don't lose that context if they just read the headline or something.
Thoughts?
So, Mayor Pro Tem, so as I'm reading it for the Washington, the ban shell, that would go from 60 to 100. So, you know, the number Kim always used was approximately $75. Politics in the park. So it would more than double that budget, but I don't disagree. Things need to change dollar wise. And we've always been really careful to stick around and pick trash up and all of that, so that if somebody is going to use it on a number of Wednesdays or Thursdays, is it then would that just be a one-time refundable $250 and lock in?
I could quit here.
I got you. Mayor Pro Tem, yes. So for each reservation, we would request that deposit. And, you know, unfortunately, the reality is that sometimes users cause a lot of damage, and the $100 deposit that's required now just isn't enough to cover that. And so we do feel it's necessary to increase that deposit amount, but certainly if people cared for the property, then it would be 100% refundable minus a small fee.
Mayor Pro Tem, so I think what I'm getting at is, so she books 10 dates, you know, consecutive Wednesdays, except during the fair and rodeo. We usually take that week off during the political season, but so obviously she wouldn't need to pay $250 times 10 for deposit.
I believe, Mayor, Councilor, that we would consider that one reservation if she's reserving the facility a number of times. She's still calling and making one reservation. And so we would evaluate the property probably after each.
Deposit would roll over potentially.
Yeah.
I would like to also mention that we did include the green space in front of this band shell as a part of the rental, this where it used to be separated.
Oh, it did.
So it is included.
Did not realize
Not to pile on the band shell, but I similarly want to make sure that use increases there with all the improvements that we're making. So I want to make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot here by making it less a less desirable space to rent after all the work that, you know, we've done and the city has supported and the constituents have supported. So I wonder if that one does justify a little bit more outreach to some folks who have used it, or so I'm looking, you know, at even the comparables there. Looks like Greeley is just slightly less than that, and Cheyenne maybe also less, depending. I mean, they do it per hour, which is obviously a different format than we're suggesting, but you know, theoretically, you could get an event done for $100 there if it's a 2-hour event. So I wonder if that one should, you know, either be just kind of wait and let some of the renovation get done and see what the demand looks like and see where we're headed with that one, or if some user outreach might help inform a decision there.
So, I think my concern there is if you've got groups, obviously they've got there's restrictions and the need for a porta potty. Then if you're going to have a food truck, that's all got to be licensed also, and the insurance, you know, is an additional cost for groups. I'm assuming those are still in place, insurance and porta potties.
Mayor, Councilor, so for special events of a certain size, I believe it's
100.
100, okay. We do require a special event permit, which comes with certain provisions, including portable restrooms, you know, depending on if there's alcohol or not alcohol, there's other certifications or licenses that may be required, or permits, excuse me. So that would all remain the same. I can say in terms of Washington Park specifically, part of the improvements to the property is to, you know, make dedicated food truck space with electricity available, to make hopefully permanent restrooms. Obviously for large events, we may still have to supplement with porta johns, but you know, some of the proposed improvements to that park will hopefully take some of the burden off people renting and just provide a more holistic, nice amenity for them to utilize. So again, it's the investment that we're looking at making and the improvement that we feel like justifies the increase in the cost for a rental.
So if I could, currently on the, in particular, the band shelf, the special events, is that fee $60 or $75 currently?
Mayor, Counselor, I'm sorry, I can't speak to the amount that's charged for the special event permit, if any. This is strictly the rental rate for the facility. Any special event permitting is separate under the clerk's office. And I don't have that detail, but we could certainly get it to you if you'd like to see it.
Mayor, it's $25 to $35 for special event application. It's not for the permit, it's for the application. Yep, depending on the size of the event.
15, 30, or 50, 100, 300, or 1,000.
So in essence, if you had 100 people with the green space, and so that would probably be the $60 plus $25.
Yeah, I think so. I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, it's around there. And it is an application fee and not a permit fee.
Okay. So last question. So we don't price ourselves out of the market. So is there any thought, I mean, wiggle room as far as like 103 versus 65? I don't want to get into a bidding war, but how flexible does staff feel?
Mayor, Counselor, so we bring these proposals to council in work session so we can talk through it and we'll take the direction that council wants to see. So if you feel like there's a concern that $160 will negatively impact our ability to rent that facility, we will take that direction and reduce it for the resolution that you will be approving formally later. If you would like staff to do a little bit more homework and provide that information in advance of a resolution coming forward, we could certainly do that too. So the whole reason for bringing it forward in a work session is to talk through it, take recommendations and homework, and then get it to a place where you feel comfortable approving it. What would we like to do? Go ahead.
I don't have too much heartburn. I mean, really, the only two events I was thinking of were the recurring ones, which is the municipal band and the Natrona County Republican Women Politics in the Park. There may be other ones that I'm just naive of, but those are the two I'm familiar with. Hearing that the municipal band will not have any budgetary impact, you know, I think we can, if you know, Kim needs to increase her budget, I'd certainly welcome, you know, I'd help her fundraise, and I know you would too, Pat. So maybe we could just solve that personally. Because my guess is something like a Wyoming Symphony concert going from 60 to 160. I think their budget for that event's probably $30,000, $40,000, so it's probably not that big of an impact for them. And I was gonna look up like David Street Station rates or something, and my guess is it's pretty generous in regards to, you know, holding an event at another comparable outdoor venue. So it doesn't give me a lot of heartburn. There's only one event I can think of that it might have some impact, and I'd volunteer to help solve that outside kind of city stuff, but.
I just say, I think it's 160 is still very reasonable, considering I do a lot of organizing events and all of that, 160 is not that outrageous. I think it's pretty fair still, considering, especially when the upgrades come into the park and all of that. So I don't have an issue with that at all. It's fair as far as venue prices go around town.
Selena, did you have something to? Okay, I thought you were trying to respond to somebody. Councilor Bond.
So Zelima, how much, like, I noticed in the memo you kind of forecasted, I think it was kind of maintenance costs. How much does that fee schedule, how much does that impact your budget in terms of covering maintenance costs and so forth? Did I misread that?
Mayor, Councilor, so, no, you didn't misread it. So we did some extrapolation and estimation based on our current reservations per year, which average about 650. Now that's across all park facilities, right? That's every shelter, every time somebody rents the North Casper Clubhouse, the Washington Park Band Shell, all of the shelters within our parks. We do estimate an increase in revenue by $19,000 per year, which is intended to offset the increasing costs that we're seeing. You know, I mean, we have staff clean the North Casper Clubhouse after every rental. Of course, you know, the cost of labor has gone up exponentially. We mow, we clean up trash, we do all of the things at the facilities, we repaint shelters, you know, all of the maintenance that goes into maintaining those structures that we're renting. We believe that will help offset the cost for many years, so we don't have to come back to you next year and ask for another park increase. You know, the intention is that will be able to sustain us for a couple of years until, you know, our break-even point gets out of whack again, and then we'll have to come back and say, okay, we need an adjustment again.
Does that, I mean, are you able to say, does that get you close to a break-even point with this recommended fee schedule? We're just close to, not.
No, we feel like at least initially that should exceed our break even.
Okay.
And then as inflation continues in latter years, we'll get closer to where, you know, we're just barely breaking even, and that, which is what's happening now, right? We're bringing in about $25,000 a year in revenue, but expenses continue to increase each year. And so for our fiscal year 26 budget, we anticipate that our expenses to maintain these facilities will exceed the 25,000 that we're bringing in revenue.
Sure.
So by making these adjustments, we believe that we can cover all the extra expenses associated with reservations, and then, you know, sustain that for a few years until we see inflation outpace what our reservations are bringing in.
Thank you.
So that's what I'm kind of like what you were just saying. So most parks, like still 160 is like an amazing deal in my eyes, because of that kind of space with a permanent stage. And it's, you know, sometimes it's under $1,000 right now. Let's be honest. There's a lot of venues here that you can't even get for that amount. And so to have a permanent stage and everything that amphitheater is going to offer, it's going to increase the value. But the one thing that, I mean, they're still getting a steal at 160, but is that going to be enough is what my concern was, is to cover the inflation costs of being able to upkeep that new facility once we get it done, because you know how it just snowballed and now we're fixing everything that just kind of got pushed aside. So does that really give you enough of that cushion to outrun the inflation part of fixing things and keeping it up to date?
Based on our estimates right now, the answer is yes. Only time will tell what impacts these rate changes, as well as the investments we're making in these facilities, are going to have on the rental rates and how often we're renting and how much extra maintenance we're having to do from rentals, right? Because we would have maintenance at these facilities regardless, right? It's the extra maintenance that we have when we have to clean more litter around before we can mow, when we have to remove graffiti, things like
More
that,
employee
that,
time and all of that. adds
correct.
into it,
So, you know, we've tried to forecast as best we can that this will cover our expenses for the foreseeable future. But certainly, you know, we will have to evaluate when the new rates go into effect and what the rental interest looks like into the future.
Okay, so it sounds like council generally feels comfortable with the rates proposed as is. We want to give a thumbs up to move forward with that. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next up, new membership structure at rec facilities. Dr. Sweet.
Mayor Pro Tem, counselors. So the second item specific to my department that we would like to visit with you about this evening is our new membership structure, proposed new membership structure at our recreation facilities. So I'm going to actually turn the time over to Nick Whips, our recreation manager, to sort of give you the high level view of what this change you know, means to our customers and to our division as a whole.
Mayor Pro Tem, counselors, how's everybody doing?
Good.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to explain what we've been working on specific to streamlining the structure and accessibility and everything that goes into making our rec facilities more accessible and simple to use for our community. I also have Edwin Lewis, our aquatic supervisor up here. He's been very instrumental in this process for us as a team in putting together a structure. And what I'm going to do today is just give you a high level idea of what we're planning on doing, how it compares to what we're currently doing, and then some of the exciting developments involved with access to scholarships and things like that. So with all of that said, we're proposing a revised membership structure. And like I said before, that's going to enhance accessibility, affordability, and in our research, it's going to align us with industry standards, statewide, nationwide, all of that. And what we're doing is we're proposing three primary changes to our membership structure. The first one is we're converting to monthly memberships, straight monthly memberships, with an option to pay for an entire year at a reduced rate. That's the first thing we're wanting to do. Second thing is we want to reintroduce family passes. We currently do not have a family pass structure, and we are going to with your guidance, we're going to reintroduce family passes to all of our rec facilities. The third thing is we want to add joint passes to all of our rec facilities. So when we're talking about that, the joint passes would include Kyle and your family. If you want to come and get a pass, you have all the options. If you just want to use the pool, we have a pass for you. If you are an individual that enjoys ice skating and wants to use the pool, we've got a pass for you. If you want to have an all-encompassing pass option, we will have an option for you, and within the family structure and everything associated with that. So I think by transitioning to this monthly membership structure, we're looking to simplify things. When a customer comes through the doors, we want to be able to say, here's an annual rate, here's a monthly rate, and just make it simple for our customers. This also aligns with our newly expanded scholarship program through the Community Recreation Foundation. We've been working very closely. For those of you who don't know who the Community Recreation Foundation is, they are a nonprofit partner of the Recreation Division that their goal in partnership with us for the past 25 years, give or take, is to provide opportunities for access to recreation for our community. One of their biggest funding mechanisms is providing scholarships for those who fit within the financial standards to access recreation facilities. traditionally, until the past Community Recreation Foundation meeting, they only offered scholarships for youth and seniors. There was not a scholarship option available for anybody in between. Now, as we were going through these discussions with CRF, they said, I mean, they are on board with, and they have already approved opening up scholarships to all of our community members that are eligible. Does not matter the age, but to align with that opening of the scholarships, we obviously want to be able to provide family passes. So when, you know, parent 1 and parent 2 and their kids who are eligible can come in, they can get a pass. If they're eligible, then we can fund them through Community Recreation Foundation with those scholarships. And specifically with the proposed structure, when I'm talking about it's consistent with industry standards and competitively priced, we've looked at organizations such as the YMCA, other municipalities across the state to see what they're doing. Now, obviously, each recreation facility has some nuances on how they structure their passes, what they charge, how they charge it. But in our research, the pricing structure is plus or minus within 10% of the cost charged by our neighboring municipalities, which is ensuring not only we're remaining competitively priced, but we're also still providing those high-level services. And as far as financial consideration, I just want to reiterate for all of you before we open it up for questions, our annual membership costs will not increase through this proposed restructuring of memberships. So we're not asking or presenting to you an increase. What we are presenting is a new structure that is aligning with more scholarships, making things more simple, and providing our community more opportunities to access our rec facilities. With that, I know I just threw a lot at you. We are here to answer any questions you might have.
Nick, what questions do we have? Mr. Sweeney.
What's the individual membership per year?
With the new pass structure. And once again, it is a tiered system. So I could go through every single iteration. And if you want that information, we have all of it. Councilor Sweeney, sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors. But for us, with the new pass structure, I'll just give you an example. To get an aquatics and rec combined annual pass, family pass, we're looking at $420 a year. That's just one example. So, and if you were to look at any comparison, so let's say the YMCA, or we looked at Gillette, we looked at Laramie, we looked at Sheridan, we looked at Green River, that's very competitively priced. And you will find in these pass prices, anywhere you look, it's going to be that plus or minus 10% compared to anywhere else when we're talking about those passes.
Follow up on that. Sure. So, a family pass, how many kids does that have?
Yeah, and it's tiered. So the great thing about this is Edwin has put in a structure where we don't have to cap it. So we start at one guardian or parent and one dependent, but then that tiered structure is up to 2 guardians or parents, and then we have it tiered to where we have a price for 1 child, we have a price for 2 children, we have a price for 3 children, we have a price for 4 children, and so on. But the beauty of that is when each of those family groups come in, they'll be able to tell us what they want, they'll be able to tell us their family structure, and then we will be able to simply tell them, here are your options, here are your costs, and then more importantly, if they need it and if they qualify, we will be able to then provide scholarship access for them. Yes.
So you mentioned the scholarships, that's tied to a mill levy. The community rec.
No. So the Community Recreation Foundation is a nonprofit organization that raises money each year through different events like our youth basketball tournament that we had last year.
Craft fair, right?
Yeah, craft fair. So they raise money on their own accord in partnership with us, and that money that they raise, it goes directly back to providing scholarships for those who are eligible in our community to access our recreational facilities.
So Kyle's first and then Jenna.
Thanks, Nick, for all the information. It makes a lot of sense to me to tier it and kind of incentivize adding additional. I also like the fact that the family pass starts at one guardian, one child, so that a single parent with a single child is not having to pay for a pass based on 2 parents and 2 children.
Right.
So increasing accessibility, I think that totally makes sense. I was trying to find in the memo, and I guess I'm still unclear on the fact. So we treat the rec center, the gymnasium, the workout equipment and stuff separate from the aquatic center. So are we also incentivizing, if you pick up both of those, a family membership at both of those facilities, there's also a discount than buying them piecemeal? Is that correct? Am I understanding that? Okay.
Yep. There's
Yeah.
a discount associated with the joint options.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You're just incentivizing people to, I could totally see it increasing memberships, and it makes a lot of sense to me. So thanks for all the work on it.
Counselor Jensen? Yeah, I was just lost my place. But I was just looking to, I like the tier structure. I think it's gonna, like everything pretty much Counselor Gamroth just said was kind of along the lines of what I was going for. I know I just like looked up Teton County. Do you guys want, just curiosity, just to make Pat feel a little at ease, but a family pass at their rec center is $810 for the year, max of 3 people. And so then you have an add-on of an additional 120. And then they have resident and non-resident fees too. So, I mean, we're glad we're not there. And that's what we're talking about, because that would, you'd be giving out a lot of scholarships. I think. But no, I just, my question is, and I can't remember as far as your passes go, but do we have like a military discount for those in the military, or partnership groups with, I know at one time, I think you had Halliburton, if you worked for Halliburton, they paid, you had a discount in there of some form. The other thing I'm curious about is, like, as far as city employees, do we offer a discount for city employees as a benefit for, police and everybody else too?
I can speak to the city employee discount. As far as the military discount, maybe there's some history that I don't have. For city employees in particular, they can come to the recreation center and use our facilities free of charge, and then that is actually an expense incurred that we get reimbursed from human resources. So
Do they know that?
Yeah. What's that? Sorry.
Do they know that?
Yeah,
I'm
well,
like, maybe put it on stall talk. I don't know.
Yeah.
Reminder.
We get quite a few city folks that, they'll come at lunch and use their lunch hour to use
Oh,
the
good.
facilities. As far as a military discount, no, we do not offer a military discount. Traditionally, we have offered a military discount.
Or like a senior, 65 older. I mean, shouldn't it just,
Senior, we do.
senior, you do.
So Mayor, Counselor, we do with this, we will offer a senior discount. We currently offer a senior discount. It is going up a little bit in percentage just to be competitive with the YMCA. And we'll offer a joint pass and a family discount. So those will all 3 be the discounts that we'll offer.
Is there a way that, is that optional to add that military discount in with the same senior citizen price structure?
It is very easy. And the beauty of this is we're looking for direction. We've done a lot of homework, but it is very easy to add a military discount to this structure with the proposed rollout of being June 1st.
Right, and you have this experience in this realm.
Absolutely.
I think it's just a great also for mental health and where everything is transitioning to. So you might be some grant funding in that if we start doing some more outreach to.
We can absolutely add that in, and we will add that in. Yeah.
One question. I love this. I love the flexibility of it. It sounds complicated on the back end and I'm wondering, I'm confident that you all can handle it through the spreadsheet and everything that you've built, but what is the user experience like trying to work your way through bundling and putting together all these packages? Is that going to happen in person? Is there an online calculator for, you know, plug in these options and you get spits out an amount, or how does that work?
So, Mayor, Counselor, or Mayor, yes, it is going to be easy. We're kind of anticipating it being kind of like a menu of you can just point to it. We want this. We do offer passes online as well. So as soon as one adult and one child gets put on, you'll get the family discount. Your age is already in our system. So if you're over, you get the senior discount. I don't know how the military pass would work out necessarily, but we'll figure it out. So.
Okay.
And I mean, to Edwin's point, they've spent a lot of time back end working with ActiveNet, which is our company that does all these things for us to ensure that we are already ready to go where the back end processes have already been figured out. The next step would be, after this, front end training for our frontline staff to ensure they know how to navigate working with our customers through these options. But really, we feel very confident and ready to go that on June 1st, we have a family come in, they'd be able to simply tell us what they want. We can simply show them the options available and then simply get them registered and then simply work with scholarships if needed.
Any other questions? Okay, looks like we are requesting directions. So does everybody feel good about this new structure? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, moving on, unsafe structures, dangerous buildings, code enforcement update. Moving on.
Thank you. So for this particular item, I am going to invite Justin Scott, our Chief Building Official, and Amber Jividan, our Code Enforcement Supervisor, to come up and give you the rundown on our unsafe structures, dangerous buildings, and code enforcement update.
Welcome.
Thank you, counselors. So Amber, oh, she's got it up. Okay, we have a slideshow for you. Like pictures. So this is, most of you are kind of aware of what we've been doing with dangerous buildings. This is kind of a refresher for you, to kind of give you an update where we all are on these. And for the new counselors coming in, to kind of get you up to speed with what we're doing with dangerous buildings, so that we're all on the same page. So this is Amber Jividan, Code Enforcement Supervisor. I'm Justin Scott, the Chief Building Official. We'll move on to slide number 2. So basically, it's not moving there. Some technical difficulties there. We build houses, we don't deal with it. So when we're talking about unsafe structures and dangerous buildings, we have 2 different ordinances that we're working with. Unsafe structures is a new ordinance, relatively new ordinance the council adopted back in 2020. It basically references commercial type properties. We're dealing with properties that are rental in nature. So we have a landlord and then we have a tenant. In those, we have 7 conditions, which I believe is in your council packet. I printed out. You should have. So you should have a handout that we have for the unsafe structures, which kind of gives you a brief overview of what this ordinance is. And then it has a policy in there that we have established for complaining individuals to follow in order for us to follow up and get into those. So with that unsafe structures ordinance, there are 7 conditions which we could deem a structure unsafe. The tenant of that property has to be the one that initiates us getting involved. And since I have taken over as chief building official, I have had 1 I've been able to follow up on. 99% of them are landlord-tenant dispute where somebody's getting evicted and they want to retaliate against the owner of the property. So I've had 1 that I've been able to post, and that was because of black mold. So just to give you an update on how many of those come in, we probably receive 15, 20 of them a year. And it's not very good odds, but that's kind of where we're at with those. Dangerous buildings, on the other hand, that is adopted codes. We have the 1988 edition of the Uniform Code for the Abatement of Dangerous Buildings that outlines 18 conditions that we can deem a house or structure dangerous based off of. That is what we use most often. These dilapidated structures, buildings that have vagrants, drug abuse, structural damage, things like that, that we can post a building dangerous. With that, we have limited funds to be able to deal with dangerous buildings. I'll kind of get into that a little bit here farther down, but because of staffing and funding, we really cannot go after every single vacant house that's out there. We limit them to the most dangerous houses out there. Those refer to police calls, fire calls, code enforcement involvement, all houses we have a history with. Moving on to the next slide. So just to give you a heads up on some of the associated costs of these different types of structures. So unsafe structures, when we're dealing with those, before I can get in touch with an owner, I have to do an O&E or a title report so I know who I'm dealing with. So the cost of obtaining that O&E, and we have costs associated with creating the notice that goes out to the owner, and of course mailing that out, creating the posting for the house, laminating that, and then actually going out and posting the property, following up on investigating, following up to make sure cases are resolved. Those are all the costs that would be associated with an unsafe structure. Dangerous buildings are much more involved because we are potentially demolishing a house. We have a legal process we have to follow to make sure we're everything step by step the way it needs to be done. So we have, before we even deem it dangerous, we have numerous man hours involved with that location. So like I mentioned before, we have a code enforcement history. We have police call history where police have been called numerous times for vagrants being inside the house, for drug calls, other illegal activity. We have fire calls involving, vagrants who have gotten in there and started a fire, or running extension cords to their house and started a fire. Things like that. We have a history with that location that gets us kind of in the door. With that, we can obtain an administrative search warrant to get in and investigate. That takes time to complete the necessary forms to get in front of the judge to be able to get that. Then, like an unsafe structure, we have the expense of the title reports so that we are notifying the proper people of the issues we have. We have posting and securing. So when we go and post a dangerous building, we actually have to secure it. So that is boarding up doors, windows, removing utilities from the property. We have to have PD involvement to go walk through the house to make sure we're not trapping anybody in the house. We have to make sure that it's cleared. So we have man hours associated with that. Then we also have the notice and order postage. We have the man hours associated with follow-ups, going back and resecuring the houses after we've done that, because the vagrants break in, they remove the boarding that we put up. And then all the way down to demolition, we have to arrange abatement processes. So we have to have asbestos testing done. We have to coordinate contractors, whether it's city people or demolition contractors, to go in and demolish it. Then we have following up with placing a lien on the property and all of those, man hours involved with that. So it's a much more in-depth process, takes a lot of man hours and a lot of funding. So, and as far as funding goes, I'm going to kind of jump down a bullet point to kind of head it out. So last year I presented in front of council, we discussed funding, because funding was a big option, or a big hurdle, sorry. And we set aside $50,000 from the revolving land fund to kind of pay for these demolitions. And to date, we have used $46,000 in just overall costs associated with the demolitions, which we'll get. I'm going to go through all that we've done, but that $46,000 has kind of helped us through all of those houses. We have recouped roughly $28,000 through liens that have been, paid back to the city of Casper. So as that process works, code requires that we have an actual abatement fund for this. As I mentioned, we have the revolving land fund. All funding initially comes out of code enforcement's abatement line item. And then that is reimbursed to the revolving land fund, and then liens go back into the revolving land fund when they're paid back. So with that being said, we all know that there are numerous vacant houses throughout Casper. I mean, we can literally go neighborhood to neighborhood and find a vacant house. As I mentioned earlier, we kind of limit what we deal with to the worst of the worst. I think I've pretty much covered everything on that slide. With this, we kind of get in, we're going to start getting into what we've actually worked on since I took over in 2023. Dangerous buildings aren't just a building and code enforcement issue. They're a law enforcement issue, a fire issue, and just a basic community issue. We have a couple slides here just showing some houses we've dealt with, showing some of the law enforcement activity that those houses have seen. So we see numerous, you have them here, numerous police officers, SWAT teams. This was the O'Connell Lodge. Police was over there just about every night pulling people out of that hotel. It's a huge drain on their resources to be going into these houses, making sure that they're secured and they can be out doing other calls. So now the very first property that we dealt with was June of 23. It's the O'Connell Lodge. It made headlines, Oil City. It was a big issue. It was posted because it was unsecured. It was an attractive nuisance to vagrants. There was drug illegal activity occurring, and here you have some before and after pictures of what it looked like. So there was no power, no running water. They were using the toilets. You know, it was disgusting inside, and now it's cleaned up. I mean, it's a hotel people can go stay in now. So that was a huge win for the city of Casper. Our next project was 933 South Poplar, which was a manufactured house that had caught on fire. People were breaking in and getting into that trailer, and so it was posted because of those reasons, and now the trailer has been demolished. That's one that the city actually demolished, and the owner paid back the lien. The property was sold to a new investor, and waiting to see what happens with that lot. Next one was 1523 Westridge Court. One of the previous pictures showed law enforcement activity that was in relation to this house. It was a huge drug house. Amber can scroll through. That's a before and after, but this is kind of what the house looked like when we posted it. This is what the people were living in. There was a fire in this house also, which was started by squatters. Fire got to deal with that. And this is the after. So we had an investor that bought this property, went in and completely renovated the house. And that's what it looks like after. And we move on to 1027 West 14th. This is one that code enforcement had a huge history with. It was a hoarder house, it was a squatter house, it was a drug house. It was, the neighborhood just hated it. They were terrified of this house. So we posted it because it was a squatter house because of the drug activity. So these are some before pictures of the hoarding and just living conditions. This is another one that we had an investor, and this is one code had to do a forced cleanup on. So this is after the forced cleanup. We had an investor buy this property and completely renovated, and this is what the after pictures look like. So you can see there's a huge difference in these houses and huge difference for the neighborhood. 1342 West 13th is another one that made headlines, I believe, in Oil City. This one had squatters. It was open to the public. People kept breaking into it. The house next door, they had broken into the house next door, which was for sale, and ran extension cords from that house across the property line into this house. So they were feeding a squatter house with extension cords, and I don't know if we have pictures here, but some of the extension cords, when we got in there, they were actually literally to the point of catching on fire. They were ready to catch fire. So it was a huge fire hazard. You can see in the top right picture there that was their heat source. They had a Weber barbecue grill that they had vented out through a window. So that was their cooking and heat source. This was another neighborhood issue. So that one was posted because of drug activity and because of it had egress issues, windows were boarded. It was just an unsafe overall house. So that one, the city actually went in and demolished. And that one, I believe we also had the lien paid back on. So that's part of the $28,000 we've seen. The Kinley Street, that's one where the car kept crashing into the house. The last car-house collision was the one that did it in. It was structurally unsafe, so we had to deem that one. And the owner actually contracted with demolition contractor to demolish that one. Had we not gotten involved, it probably would have just stayed boarded up like the picture shows.
Justin, can I ask on that one specifically? Is that still zoned residential? Do you, would you be okay with somebody building a house there again, or do we need to reconsider?
No, someone could build a house there again. Yeah, I don't think setbacks are an issue with that lot.
He actually owns the lot next to it as well, so conceivably he could build to the next lot over, so he wouldn't be in direct line of fire, if he would.
Because I mean, that was like half a dozen different instances of a car going in.
Yeah, he owns both lots, so he could actually put the house more to the south, so it would be safer. If he
And maybe a boulder or something.
Bigger boulders. I guess you're going over. All right, so we move on to East 14th now, 305, and this was another code enforcement nightmare. It was a hoarder house. The backyard was just completely full of junk. This also had a fire in it, and fire was worried that the owner was going to try to occupy the structure with no power, which he was going to do, so we ended up posting it because of the fire damage, because of the hoarding issues, and it was also open to vagrants, wouldn't secure it. And this is another one that our investor bought the property and demolished it. And they're planning on building a new house on that corner. And then the next one is one of Amber's favorites, so she's going to discuss this one.
This house on the surface from the street level would look very inconspicuous. However, from the back, it was a nightmare. And I'll show you what I mean. As you can see from the left-hand side from the street view, you wouldn't think that this was going to be a heavy hitter with us and have just a habitual house. This was a house that every single year we would have issues with, and we have probably over $6,000 of our funds every year continuously with this house as just a nightmare house, a hoarder house, and a squatter house. The reason I say that you wouldn't notice this is because it backs up to a city park, and this is the aerial view of it. So as where the green pin is the main house. There's a back house and a garage in between those two. Meadow Park is what you see behind it, and there's an alley view. So they had a great shot straight off the alley where generally speaking, you wouldn't see anything from the street level of it, except for tall weeds and grass. However, the squatters knew that it was unoccupied and vacant, and this is what they would do to the backyard almost every year. Multiple forced cleanups on this house, never paid the bill, and we would just eat the cost over and over again. This house was a house where in the garage, right there, that kind of sits at an angle up against the alley, is the back house, and in between the two houses is the garage. They were operating generators inside that garage and powering both houses with extension cords. When we went in finally to post this house as a dangerous building with fire, the oxygen level in the garage was absolutely so low that we actually had to back out and ventilate the garage so we could actually be having safe levels for us even at a distance, because it was so low, because they were operating generators inside there. So they were powering the house, which obviously was a fire hazard with the extension cords. So we'll get to some more pictures inside of that, but this was just a continuous issue. That being said, we'll dovetail onto that. This owner also owns a house, which I'm sure you all are very well aware of, at 12th in Nebraska, which is also a heavy hitter code enforcement nightmare for us that we are still dealing with on a daily basis. So she owns a fourplex over there. We still deal with her. We just don't have two houses to deal with her. Now we have one. So still on our radar, still everyday occurrence with us, but just one house. But you'll get to see what has happened with this house. It was bought by an investor, has been flipped, and has a new owner. So it's in a much better place now. So this is one of the last force cleanups that we did do. That was about a $3,000 bill to get this cleaned up for us. So as you can see here, the power cords are running into the house there with the red arrows. You can see the power cords at the top there with the lights. And it is a little difficult to see. The bottom left-hand corner is where the generators were in the garage, but you can see the power cords kind of strung along there. Multiple needles were found in this location over and over again, so we had to be very careful with this location. And then when we get here, this is the inside of the main house and how they were living. What they wanted to inside there. This is how the interior of the main house looks now, once it was flipped and brought back to life. So new owners or the contractors that did this did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of bringing that back to new life. So that's how it stands, and it was sold. So this is one of the last ones, well, second to last one.
Yes, this is Fox Elders, another hoarder house that had a fire, which kind of rendered it inhabitable. The fire is what did it in as far as getting on our radar, because she was still trying to live in the house after the fire. So this is one where we posted it and she sold it to an investor. This is showing kind of a picture of what the outside looked like when we posted it. And then here's what it looks like after the investor got in there and renovated the house. So this is another one on Nebraska, 1385. It's actually, at one time it was going to be townhouses up and down Nebraska. The contractor built just this one unit and let it sit for years. And PD kept getting calls. Their teenagers were getting in there, kids were getting in there, vandalizing it, spray painting it, drug activity. So we went in and posted it, secured it, and the contractor has since, well, you can see the before and after. He's gone in and I wouldn't say he's finished it and it's ready to move in, but we have made it look better. We've secured it. And he's aware that he can't let it get back to where it was, or we will go back in there and demolish the structure. So. And I might let Amber talk about this one too, because
this
one
is
she's actually.
this is one that recently we have posted. This is a doozy. This particular structure is right along the river in North Casper and is still in the process of currently trying to be renovated by an interested party that is got power of attorney over the owner. So she's working on trying to bring it back to life. It's a slow process. However, the squatters that were in there were also living in the campers and in the house, and were known to also be basically emptying their tanks, their black water tanks, as well as any buckets of human waste that they had into our river. So it was never anything that we could catch. They would do it at night. They would do it on the sly. We had many reports of it, but we were just not able to catch it. This is kind of how we know that they were doing it. Here you have the campers, RVs, And right there in the yellow, you can see the hoses that they would hook up to the campers. These campers were partly parked within 50 feet or less of the river. So we know that they were doing it, we just couldn't prove it. Which is one of those things. Knowing and proving it is just very difficult for us to get them into the court system, but it is one of the driving forces that did assist us in getting that camping ordinance changed and camping in the city, because we know what they were doing. And this has been a work in progress. It is cleaned up quite a bit from what you see here in the pictures, but these are the houses that we really try to get posted as a dangerous building. This has been posted as a dangerous building. This is what they do. When we get squatters in there, they find this stuff, they bring it in, they make the properties look like this, they get the generators. Amazingly enough, most of these squatters always have the same kind of generators. There's gotta be a market for it, I don't know. So they bring in these generators, they run the wiring like this. They cut actually a hole in the side of the wall where the meter should have been and start running these power cords and extension cords and power the houses this way. They run it to the campers, and then they were running seriously bucket loads of human waste over to the dumping it in our rivers. So this is what we try to avoid and try to mitigate. One of the other houses that we were talking about too over on 14th also was doing that, the big dumpster that we had, and I can go back if you want, where we had cleaned it up and it had been a flip house. They were also, we had to have the Balefield Special Hazardous Waste team go and pick up dumpster buckets of hazardous waste because they were just putting it out and leaving it out there. So, you know, it takes a mass amount of our city resources to go after these types of houses. And it's not just our departments. It takes a massive amount of resources to address these.
So Amber, has this one you were just talking about, has it been resolved?
It's still in process. It's still posted as a dangerous building. We still, we do have some permits pulled on it. She is working on it. It is not anything like this currently. It has been cleaned up. We don't have the RVs. We don't have all the junk. It's been force cleaned up since this as well, but they have been keeping it clean. She's slowly working on the interior. The squatters are not there. So, I mean, is it done? No. Has it improved 100%? Yes. Are they dumping in the river anymore? No. So we've fixed that issue, correct.
So that's kind of an overview of what we've accomplished in the last 2 years since kind of starting this process back up. As you can see, we kind of did, we'll deem one dangerous, they move on to the next house. We're just kind of chasing squatters around the city. But with the limited, they take a lot of manpower. It's not just code enforcement manpower, building department manpower, PD manpower, solid waste, fire. It's, as Amber said, it's a drain on the whole city as a whole. So with limited funding we have, we do the best we can, but we have accomplished some good things. We've cleaned up a lot of neighborhoods, and we're just kind of open for continued support and just kind of get everyone up to speed so everyone knows kind of what we've been working on, and appreciate everyone's support. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask us. We'll see what we can do to help you out.
Thank you. Councilor Gamma.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks for the presentation and all the information. First off, some really impressive examples of properties getting turned around. And so I personally would love to see that shared more on city social media. I think it would give some context to this conversation and people understand kind of what extent some of these properties get to. And I think it would build a lot more goodwill and support around this idea of us being a little bit more aggressive about deeming dangerous buildings. So I personally, I think it would be great social media fodder. And so would love to see us utilize that more. My question is, sounds like you've prioritized kind of the most egregious examples, but it sounds like you're being bottlenecked by funding. It sounds like there's other properties that also present issues or resource drains for some of our other departments, but you're simply capped due to the funding. And so I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting that. Is that also your perspective?
Funding and manpower.
Okay.
Like I said, it takes a ton of time to do all the paperwork, to continue to follow through. I mean, not only for code and building, but the attorney's office, because we go through them multiple times with every case to make sure that we're following step by step. So that when we get to demolition, we're not violating someone's rights, you know?
Sure.
But yes, Amber has code enforcement responsibilities to do. I have inspection responsibilities to do. So being able to devote my entire day to dealing with this, it's just not feasible. So manpower and funding is definitely a big hurdle.
And we do, code enforcement does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
We do the weekly inspections, we do the posting, and we do, of course, a lot of the code enforcement of this type of, you know, with the junk. So, and I have 2 officers in the field and myself. So, plus I have the rest of the city to deal with just day-to-day operations. But that being said, you know, it's not just manpower, but I mean, it's a multi-layer event. Our goal is never to demolish. That's our last ditch effort. That's when we have no other options. Our options are if there is somebody that comes in and wants to purchase the property and flip it, ultimately, that's always it's always better than having an empty lot. Because taking somebody's property and doing a demolition is always a huge hurdle. And so that's a huge ask of someone. We do post current dangerous buildings on our website. So anybody that's an investor that is interested has that opportunity to say, hey, this is what the city's working on. And if somebody's interested and has the interest, they can look at that. So then they can look into that. Generally speaking, most of these dangerous buildings tend to have some pretty significant liens on them. So that's always a financial hurdle because there's some liens that investors have to overcome first. So, you know, it's not always an easy ask for an investor to say, hey, come buy this property and take over all these liens and handle that and flip the property and expect to make it into a investment property that will pay on the other end. So, because they're not good properties. So.
I would defer to the city attorney if he's got any.
Mayor, if I might just interject, and so to that point, really picking the properties where we know that if we have to demolish and abate the entire property, there's a high likelihood that the city can recoup its costs. And one thing that I have floated with a couple local legislators is a statutory change that would allow the city, if we had to do an abatement, to basically have super priority over other previously filed liens. Because in essence, if you know, I have a judgment lien against a property and it's dilapidated and worth nothing, but if the city comes in and cleans it up, now I've got a $50,000 lot, it's a windfall because I'm on the back of the taxpayer. So it seems like there maybe is some interest in exploring that at the state level. That would certainly give us another tool to try to recoup those costs. But that is certainly one of the first discussions we have, because we don't want to be in a position where we're tagging them and then not following through. So if it gets posted, we're either working really hard to get an investor to flip it, or we're prepared to go the entire length and you know, abate the nuisance if we need to.
Thank you.
Sorry, I kind of want to tag on to what Eric said there. We don't want to just go start posting dangerous buildings unless we have the ability to see it through. So everyone is always saying, why don't we just post it and see what happens? Well, I've got to be able to back it up, or my threat, you know, there's no avoid.
So my follow-up is in that regard. I understand that this requires kind of coordination between multiple departments, building, attorney, code enforcement. And so I don't know how possible it is to add full-time positions across all those departments in order to be more proactive about this, but I certainly would be interested if all it takes is taking our reserve budget to 50,000 and increasing that to 75 or 100 and adding one full-time employee to code enforcement. If we can be more proactive and work down that list in a more aggressive manner, I would certainly entertain that discussion and like to talk about it more. I would like to address whatever bottlenecks there are and, you know, see if there is a pragmatic approach to handling that, because again, I'm impressed with the work that we've done, and I believe strongly in this idea that, you know, dilapidated structures and kind of dilapidated areas, there's absolutely a correlation with crime, and so I think the more proactive we can be about this, I think that's a good use of our dollars to decrease crime and decrease these vagrancy-related crimes that we're experiencing here. As you mentioned, it's a resource suck already, and so if we can just invest more up front and potentially realize some cost savings on the back end, I would love to have that conversation, whatever that looks like. It's hard for me to wrap my head around what the impact would be, again, from a employment FTE kind of perspective, but I'd love to see some numbers if we're able to put them together.
Take that back to Carter. Yes, ma'am. Notes taken. Counselor Bond, you had something?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to say kudos to both of you for and the work your department's done in this area. Amber, I think some of these look familiar from my ride along a couple years ago when I first came on council. So good, nice work.
Been a lot of work in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember some of those. The one on Birch, that's very familiar. Yeah. But I also wanted to just mention, and Liz knows the house I'm going to refer to. So there's a situation that the homeowner came and visited with us, I think, at council, and was just a little bit frustrated by it has a what would probably, you know, if they weren't the owner or wasn't a conscientious owner, would be deemed an unsafe structure. Well, they've cleaned out the house. It was not abandoned, but it kind of was abandoned. But they've cleaned it out. You know, the foundation is crumbling. It probably should be demolished. But it's secured. It's safe. It's boarded up. So there's no vagrants, no homeless or vagrant individuals living in the home, which is good. So they're being responsible property owners and taking care of that. They just did a little snafu with kind of their plan for their vision for what they wanted to do with the property. It was an ordinance that made sense, and so now their pathway is to request an exemption to the ordinance. Is that because this still is not resolved, and I think they're just kind of mulling it over for the winter and trying to decide what they want to do this spring? Would that be a typical course of action for them, or a responsible course of action for them to take on, is to try the exemption route with the city code? Or
I guess, Counselor, I'm confused on what they would be wanting an exemption on.
Well, what it boiled down to was demolishing a house. The city ordinance precludes having a garage on a lot without a house. And so that wasn't part of their vision. They wanted to use the garage for other purposes. They live adjacent to that property in another house. And, you know, the house, like I said, should be demolished. It's an eyesore. It's secure and it's cleaned out, but there's just that, and the ordinance makes sense. I understand why the ordinance is in place. So that it would be an exemption to the ordinance around having a single garage structure without an accompanying house on the property.
Eric?
Mayor, Counselor, so it's really hard. I think I know generally what you're talking about, so it's hard to really specifically comment on an exact situation.
Sure.
What I would say, when I hear citizens wanting an exception or a variation from the ordinance, the first thing we have to do is ascertain whether that particular instance, such a thing even exists, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to have an ordinance or a code that allows them to petition for an exemption from that requirement. And if there is, then they can move forward requesting that. A lot of times there isn't even that mechanism, and so I
think in this case it was.
And so if there is, then they could certainly apply for that, and then it's really up to staff to take a look at that. And then every time that there's a decision by staff, there's due process that's built in, and they can go up the chain. But to specifically, I'm not in a position where I can specifically comment, but I think that would be the process they would work through. And I would work with staff, and they would, we'd work together to ascertain what that process is and advise them accordingly. So Justin, I don't know if you had anything else to add, but.
Yeah, this would be more of a zoning.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the process that goes to planning and zoning
We go before the
for the
Correct.
review the request for the exemption and. Okay. Right. Thank you. And last thing I want to say is, I applaud your restraint for not asking for more money, but I agree with Councilor Gemroth. I think if it's in the budget, I think it would be nice to have more manpower to address these kind of dangerous situations.
So a couple of things. So appreciate the presentation and all the work. So I live in North Casper, 951 North Kimball. So one block to the west, which I can't remember the street. So K and whatever that street is, I know it's not Park because Park's the other way, but there's 2 burnout houses on each corner, and they've been there for years. And they're boarded up, but it makes sense to me if we know as a city what's going on, and there are investors that might be interested in purchasing that property and then tearing down the structure. That seems to me like an easier route to go if you guys can act as an intermediary between maybe the insurance company, bank has it, I don't know. But I see no action on either of those. The one on the west side of that street, the purple one, probably, I'm gonna guess 10 years plus. And I'm guessing the city has gone in and done the weeds and brush removal on that one in particular. But, so that's one thing. I mean, yet another thing is I was curious on this, that you go in and actually test for asbestos unless regs have changed on something up at the landfill. The last house, so I tore down, the contractor said, I asked him about asbestos, and he said, with a residential structure like this, there's not that requirement. So I don't understand, I guess, why the added concern over asbestos just because it's the city.
Counselor, we're acting as a commercial contractor, so to speak, when we go in and demolish those. So you as a homeowner, you don't have the same legal responsibility to make sure you're dealing with asbestos appropriately, where we as a commercial entity that are going in and demolishing a structure do. So it's a state requirement that we test all houses for asbestos before we go in and demolish them.
Follow up. So to that point, it would seem to me to find an investor that wants to come in and take care of it all, and it alleviates you guys, the city, being a middleman, if that's possible. But so I'll leave that one alone. I totally agree with Kyle and Mike on, if we can up the budget, because there's commercial, that's property. But if we can up the budget, but I think the other thing in messaging is, this is bad on me, but in particular, 2 buildings, the Econo Lodge. So I did make calls, trying to find out, okay, am I gonna have to put a sprinkler system? Am I gonna have to, if I bought it and renovated, am I gonna have to put a sprinkler system and I'm gonna have to bring the electrical all up to code? The answer back was yes. To me, at that point, I estimated those two at probably well over 2 million. And that just priced everything out without any consideration for any freeze ups, plumbing, or anything else. So I walked away. Unfortunately for me, I had that stuck in the back of my head, never called the realtor back for proper negotiations. And I kick myself in the ass for that one. The other one I'd bring up is First and Center. And so I used to own that building and worked with the city. I didn't have the money to do the sprinkler system all at once. Knew it needed it. And so that was a factor of me selling. But the other thing, this current buyer has really got stung by my opinion on the fire code as far as the stairwells. The existing one, there's nothing wrong with it, except today's code, it's not wide enough. So there's no consideration, and the city's demanding that you put an external one out the back on the Market Street side, which per floor, there's only 2,000 square feet per floor. And that structure alone, I'm estimating at close, well, he actually did price it, current owner, but close to $1 million today to build a structure. Plus you eat up about 200 square feet on that corner, which reduces, your square footage to do anything with it. So right off the bat, it's extremely hard for him to try to sell it. He's had different buyers, but I would just ask, would somebody please look at that and see if there's a different, because there's Tony Searcy looked at that and he would have been a perfect buyer. He would have put a ton of money into that. And at the time, wasn't gonna need to do all of this extra stairwell stuff. But so I think in order to move that property, somebody's gonna have to, work with a buyer and not say, no, we've got to have these additional fire features, when I know for a fact this ladder truck goes to the roof. That was an argument before this current truck we have, but I was in the building doing some work on one of the bathrooms, and the fire department was doing drills on Center Street, and I went out and I said, hey, would you like access to the 9th floor? Oh, we love it. So they did a drill, and I said, will the ladder go to the top floor or to the roof? They said, yeah. So I mean, sometimes we've just got to be consistent in the messaging, and that's of concern to me, that building. Otherwise, I think it's going to sit there. So good luck in tearing it down.
Any other? I just have a quick thing. Do we have a status on that? I know you guys got it all boarded up, but the building that's on CY and 13th, that rectangular.
Bet it hurts.
I don't know.
You bet it hurts.
Blue and
Yes.
graffitied.
The old tattoo shop.
Yeah. The what?
It's an old tattoo shop.
Tattoo
You
shop.
bet it hurts.
You bet it. Okay. Is there status on that?
So right now, that building is secured and safe.
Yeah.
That one poses a lot of difficulties if we were to get to demolition because it's
Connected.
multiple owners, it's got its location, it could be a very expensive demolition, and I'm sure there's tons of asbestos in there, so that one, the owner secured it, they're keeping it secured, we're not gonna really push it at this point, just because we don't have, I would
Okay.
wipe out our demolition fund.
So you have
essentially. So,
Don't, or you have the actual owner is
yes.
ordered it up and
So,
stuff.
and actually, the owner has a relative who's wanting to buy it from her and renovate it, so we're kind of hoping
Hopefully it
that
happens
follows
soon.
through.
Is there an
They are
incentive
aware
we
that
can
if it
offer?
become an unsecured premises, we start having problems with vagrants getting in there, then we'll push it a little bit harder.
Yeah.
But for right now, they are keeping it safe. So I know it's ugly, but we gotta kind of put our money where we can be more useful.
Right,
So
keep
that's what
chipping
we're
for paint, just to paint the outside. Make it blend in a little better.
And that is the hard part. They're ugly. We have a lot of ugly things out there, but we
Yeah.
go after this kind of
This-
stuff
yeah.
that is really the problematic houses.
Tough job, appreciate you.
Brandy. Just quick, and I was on the Dangerous Buildings Committee, so I know this, but maybe just a real quick version of the difference between an abandoned building and a dangerous building. I know you said there's 18 qualifications, but maybe just give us a couple examples where you bet it hurts, or this building over here on North Casper, why it would
Yeah.
qualify as being abandoned but not dangerous.
So Counselor, the big thing is city staff involvement with the properties and then being unsecured. So North Casper, I know exactly which houses those are because when I was a code enforcement officer, I actually did forced cleanups and I towed vehicles out of there. I do know that there have been investors that have tried to buy both of those locations and owners are not wanting to sell. So it's not for lack of effort. It's just sometimes owners just don't want to. They think the house is worth more than it really is, you know. So an investor's not going to go pay more money than they can successfully put into the house, sell it, and make a profit on. So, but short and sweet, it's if we have lots of police calls, that's going to trigger us. And then if it's unsecured to where vagrants, children, anybody can get in there, that's a big issue. If it's ugly but secured, until it becomes an unsecured property where we have drug activity, fires, police involvement, it's, we just don't have the resources to deal with it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One last comment, kind of follow up to Councilor Sweeney's, and then a little bit, I think Councilor Jensen mentioned it, but I would, welcome any opportunities that y'all see for us to be more innovative or open-minded or flexible in regards to some of these properties that have, I understand some people just don't want to sell. And, I don't think it's the government's, position to force activity on that, but there's other ones where I think, especially if we are having incidences over periods of time where we're having to contribute city resources to manage that, or if they're posing public health concerns, I would like us to, First and Center is a great example of an opportunity that has so much, a property that has so much opportunity, so much potential. And if it is simply a matter of code preventing somebody from investing heavily in that structure and doing something really cool and innovative with it, if we have any ability on the city's side, I know times we're bound by international building codes and international fire codes, but I would like to be as flexible as possible, as open, out of the box as possible to try to spur investment in some of these properties, because my concern is that they are just going to languish for years, for decades, and we are going to have resources from the city responding. I know First and Center has had vagrants break into it. You bet it hurts. I had to call that in because I saw one of the boards ajar and it looked like somebody had broken into that. And so I know that this requires resources just spent over long periods of time. And so I would welcome and hope that something in the way of, flexibility or suggestions be brought to us so that we can be a better partner If you see any opportunity for us to be working with investors to redevelop these properties, I would just, I don't live in this world. I don't build houses. I don't flip houses. So I'm ignorant about what those opportunities look like, but I hope that we're very creative in our approach to bring those to us, because I would love to do whatever we can to help rehabilitate or demolish or otherwise fix some of these buildings that, as somebody who's lived here for 30 years, some of these buildings, you know, I got pulled up. I drive by this one on CY every day across from PV Liquor. I don't know how long that motel restaurant area has been vacant, but it feels like my whole life. And so I don't know if there's anything we can do to help spur development in those areas, but I would love to hear any ideas that the city or investors or developers, anybody that knows more about this industry than I do, I hope they bring those recommendations and suggestions to us.
I walked through it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you
Vacant
very
then too?
much for the presentation. The only thing I would add is if we can get this in an info packet down the road, I think it'd be helpful for us when we need to provide detail to constituents about like, why is their property not at the top of the list? We could point to some examples that I think would be helpful. Okay, thanks.
These photos are kind of toned down. I mean, we have a lot more graphic photos, but these kind of got the point across.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
The
We
PG
appreciate the
version.
information. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda review.
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't have anything for agenda review this evening.
Okay, great. Then we can move to council around the table. Start with Councilor Gamro.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You joined me at a Metro Animal Shelter Task Force meeting last Wednesday. So we recently got a $10,000 grant from Best Friends to begin the traps spay and neuter program. We finally have enough staff at the shelter to begin doing that. And so they're going to the first step of the process is to develop a feeding habit with these feral cat colonies. You feed them, you build that habit within them that they come to this place for food, and then you trap them all at once. It's kind of the most effective use of the funding and the resources. And so they are starting to develop that feeding habit by the end of this month and going to begin trapping here in the next couple weeks, early April. We are coordinating with Casper Community Cats. It's a local nonprofit volunteer group that does sort of this thing on their own. And so going to be coordinating with them to leverage their volunteers and making sure we're not duplicating efforts and just, partnering as well as we can. Sounds like we're going to use vets from Douglas just because it's much cheaper to do that. They're looking to develop a tiered system for volunteers at the shelter. So depending on what you would like, whether it's simply walking a dog around our area or volunteering for one of these spay and neuter events, they require certain different levels of training and certifications. And so they're going to develop a tiered system for volunteers so that we're using as much of the volunteer base as possible while also making sure that we're abiding by any standards there are in regards to any formal training they might require for some of the more advanced things that they might be involved with. By mid-April, the shelter is going to be rolling out a new licensing management system. They are down one full-time and one part-time kennel tech. Unfortunately, we had some folks on the funnel and it just didn't pan out. And so anyone that might be interested in working at the shelter, I'd encourage you to apply. And still working to get the contract for design and construction of the new shelter. Sounds like the timeline at this point is to begin full construction sometime early next year. And they provided an update on those supplemental kennels that we had budgeted for. I think that was sometime last year. It is helping with overflow and disease mitigation. So glad to hear that it's serving its purpose. Had a Casper Housing Authority board meeting last Thursday. They're at a 75 or 78% lease up rate. My understanding, again, that's a very complicated world, but my understanding is that that means there's 22% of the folks that are trying to lease up through them that are not eligible per the HUD guidelines. And I've mentioned in the council around the table before, but Grant Marsh is somebody who has owned a lot of property historically and would serve that demographic of people that, need some very affordable housing, but do not qualify for HUD guidelines for one reason or another, whether it's felony records or what have you. It sounds like he's continuing to sell some of his properties. And so I am still worried about that demographic of people not having a place to live. And so I want to stress again the importance, I think, of our body and other bodies working with the legislature to address the affordable housing gap. It sounds like there was initially concern about us losing our HUD office. I believe it's in the Dick Cheney building. I think our local congressional reps have been advocating to retain that, and it sounds like we are not going to lose it, at least at this point in time. But that would certainly be a blow if we lost that office here locally. Mark is our rep, and he joins us at our homelessness coalition meetings, and he's very involved with our housing authority. And so really hoping we can preserve that into the future. And then lastly, well, sorry, there's one more, I guess. The Five Trails Rotary Club assisted with purchasing materials for our dugouts, as well as participated in the physical building of dugouts at the fields at 13th and Sycamore. So I want to give props to that group for helping to raise funds for that and volunteering some man hours to help us with that. I'm a part of the Casper Rotary Club that meets on Monday, and they've helped with the bouldering park and maintenance of bridle trail and stuff. So just kudos to the Rotary Clubs for being such great partners in our community and helping provide some of these amenities. And then lastly, we only have about an hour and a half, but there's a town hall at Barnum Community Center this evening in regards to Radiant Nuclear, which is a advanced manufacturer looking to build here. They build portable nuclear reactors. And so I imagine it'll be, what's that?
I think it's just a piece.
Oh no, it's a whole unit. It'll provide 1 megawatt of power. So very interesting, cool concept, but I imagine it's a great opportunity for community input and feedback. So if you're watching this and it sounds interesting to you, zip on over and meet a couple of us over at the town hall. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Sweeney?
What?
Councilor Haskins?
What? I don't have anything this week either. Public health was canceled, so
Councilor Jensen?
Kyle, did you do an update on OYD? I didn't make that meeting.
Oh, no, sorry.
There.
Yeah, there was a joint Old Yellowstone District, Downtown Development Authority, and Downtown Casper Business Authority meeting last night. Thank you. It was mostly just an opportunity for all those groups to get together, making sure that we're collaborating going into this next year, sharing concerns. We talked about a lot of different issues, kind of the new direction of the DDA now that the David Street Station is not part of their portfolio. Homelessness is always a topic in those conversations. So just talked about what we're doing there. I got a lot of feedback in regards to the open container ordinance that we will be discussing here. My guess is in the coming weeks. So I think I got a general consensus of all those groups in regards to what they would like to see for the open container ordinance. So I will bring that feedback to that discussion. But it was a really good opportunity to get all those folks in the room. Doesn't happen very often. There's not a ton of overlap between the groups. So yeah, I thought it went really well. It was a great networking event for all those groups to get together and make sure we're all sharing in the vision and goals of downtown development. Thanks. Is that Signet Brewing? Great food if you haven't been there. Thank you.
So I don't have anything, but I just wanted to add on to what Kyle said too about Rotary. So I belong to that Five Trails now. Rotary switched over to that club, and again, we did that softball dugout thing is what he's talking about. But if you have, we're always open to more ideas. And so they're looking for more projects now, but they always try to keep it around youth. So if anybody comes up with an idea of something else.
I believe Zulim is in touch.
Yep. Then we will do that. Yeah, so we are looking for another project. That's it.
Great. Councilor Bond?
I attended the senior center board meeting yesterday. I don't know if I've mentioned this before or not, but they have their previous director, Amy, has gone on to other pastures, and their new director is Rachel Brown. And so Rachel's been with the center for quite a while, so she hit the ground running. They're looking forward to submitting their senior district application for funding here pretty shortly, and working on that budget. And other than that, there wasn't much else. And then I have a youth mental health collective meeting next Wednesday. We're doing an extended 3-hour retreat to work on the third spaces. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Kyle, I did want to ask about the trap, the TNR. Do you know is that an ongoing thing, or is that kind of come as funding is available throughout the year? How does that work?
My understanding is it would be several large events, but I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's ongoing. I mean, we have the $10,000 to spend and no further funding has been allocated to my
Okay.
knowledge. So I think if I understood correctly, that would cover several cat colonies that have been already identified.
Okay.
Does not solve our problem, but can address a few pockets, and then we would just need to be seeking additional funding. I'm not sure if this grant in particular would allow us to come back for an additional round, or if there's, you know, it's a one-time only thing, but I think this is sort of the pilot of it, and so it'll be as many traps as $10,000 can get us, I think. Yeah.
And as many neuters and spaces?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, all of it. Mhm.
Do you remember where that $10,000 grant come from?
I do. It's from Best Friends.
Best Friends. Okay.
Yeah, so they've done a number of things with the shelter there. They came and did some assessment of it that we used in our conversations as we over the last couple of years have been evaluating that facility, and yeah, we've been in touch with them pretty
Help us
significantly.
revise our ordinances to make sure it's in line with best practices, and
Yep.
they've been a great partner,
Yep.
it seems like.
So is that kind of their strategy, is to find these colonies and try to mitigate them
Yep.
as best as
Yeah, there's a pretty prescriptive process for TNR. Like it's well documented, sort of how to do it. You have to get the whole colony at once. I know more about it than I probably would like to be honest with you, but cats are not a passion project of mine. But yeah, so you have to kind of you got to get a sort of a critical mass of that colony spayed and neutered at the same time, so that the colony sort of stops repopulating itself. And so they're taken as you know, as a colony in its entirety. And then the goal is that you return them back there, and then that colony lives out the rest of its days, but does not continue to generate new members of the colony over time.
Okay.
And so then you just keep repeating that process by colony.
So the question I was getting was about, like, if a homeowner has you know, finds a feral cat.
Yeah.
They should still report it.
Yeah.
To Metro, correct?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that was their question, was would that single feral cat?
No, we would not address an individual feral cat through a TNR program. It has to be, but that feral cat is very likely a member of a larger colony. And so it's a matter of like investigating, like, where is that colony? How far does it expand? So a one-off feral cat would not be trapped and taken.
It's more of an economy of scale. The numbers only work to do as many at once.
Yeah, and if you don't get a certain critical mass, then they'll just continue to repopulate that colony. That colony will not make an impact on that colony over time. So
makes sense.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilor Larson?
I don't have anything.
Okay. So I guess I'll start by thanking all the folks who are representing us in DC right now, the mayor and vice mayor, and Carter. And I'm not sure if that's where Fleur's at or if she's elsewhere, but to all the folks who traveled there to represent our interests in DC, very thankful for them taking that time to do that. Thanks to Zulima for being our acting city manager tonight, and Eric for still being here to help us out. Yeah, thanks for that. Kyle covered most of the Metro update. I'm not sure if you mentioned, but we've seen a major increase in surrenders and strays there, and so they're very full with dogs at the moment. So take a look at adopting, and you know, help us keep some dogs moving out of that facility and into homes. And then I did have an LGBTQ advisory committee meeting on Friday. You pretty much heard from that group, so I won't spend too much time. We mostly went over that report that they were preparing for you today, and then appointed some new members as they alluded to as well. We had a couple vacancies and some applications that had come in, so we've got a couple new members there, and it's kind of the bulk of that. So I think that concludes the meeting. How many seconds we got? We're right there. So thanks everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Great work. Right on time. Right on
Did you ask
time.
you about surrounding?
Yeah. Doesn't matter. That was-
Yeah.